Here's an idea. The economics of MP3s and magic spells are more related than you think. A good number of years ago, some very smart Germans figured out that sound files have a bunch of extra stuff in them. So they wrote a piece of software which deep-sixed all the detritus, and in the process, our friend, the MP3, was born. Since then, we've developed a long-term, fulfilling relationship with Air MP3. We travel together, go to the beach together, the gym together, go to work together, us and MP3. Best buds. But there's something you might not know about your perceptually coded, super compressed audio file type friend. He has a lot in common with a more mystical file type. The magical spell. Yes, that magical spell. The hex, the ward, the whatever they did in the craft to summon all those butterflies. The kind of magical spell that up until recently you could sell on eBay. It's pretty straightforward. Basically, you pay the caster some cash, and after receiving the cash, the caster casts the spell. Or sends it to you to cast. The metaphysical section of eBay included something like 100,000 products and thousands of sellers, making it a real, maybe profitable marketplace where people were funding the development of new, cutting-edge spells. Sadly, at the beginning of September, eBay put the kibosh on spell sales because it's really difficult to be fair when a customer is upset with the quality of their purchase. Which makes sense. I mean, I'm no expert, but I'm willing to bet that casting a spell isn't a simple affair, and eBay can't be like, oh, you're the one who bought a spell. And while it might not seem obvious at first, all of this talk of the economics of spells reveals some interesting things that they have in common with digital files, specifically MP3s. Like how, far beyond the obvious conceit of using music to invoke a mood or summon a feeling or whatever, both spells and MP3s need to be encoded and decoded. This means they both have a standard on which they operate. It means a Barry White MP3 doesn't sound like terrible noise when it gets played back on another device, and that love spell doesn't make its target burst into flames. Standards ensure that intended effects are produced, and those intended effects might explain why people want to share these things with their friends, or coven. I'm not really sure, actually. And this is where things get complicated. Not because of covens, but because of sharing. Both MP3s and spells, if they are DRM-free, are what are called non-excludable. It means that it's very hard or impossible to keep people who didn't pay for them from gaining access. They are non-rival. They are infinitely copyable and infinitely usable. Back before Computrons, if you let someone borrow your Chris Howland Hammerchin Polka LP or your Totally Sweet Ancient Grimoire, you didn't have your Chris Howland Hammerchin Polka LP or your Totally Sweet Ancient Grimoire. Now you get to share all of your digital stuffs with all of your pals and keep your original copy. Okay, I'll admit that some of these comparisons are a little silly, but these things really are sort of related. We think of spells as the cultural product of a somewhat outlandish, freely available folk culture, not a commercial product made by people hoping to cover their rent. But we kind of think of music in this free folk culture kind of way too. I mean, some of the style choices are pretty similar. Even though MP3 music files aren't an object like an LP, we still feel like they're ours, collectively ours. We self-identify by them. We use them to find, build, and strengthen communities. They're a public asset that, legal or not, should be freely available. Why shouldn't you be able to share them around and entertain people with them? I mean, folk culture belongs to the folks, and we're the folks. Hammerchin MP3s for everybody. But here's the thing. Weird or normal or folk or not, all this stuff has some kind of value. And new, exciting additions to this culture, whatever its file type, are dependent upon the compensation of that value, whatever it happens to be. Without compensation, new stuff could vanish. Not like cool magic vanish, but like dinosaurs and Amelia Earhart vanish, like the Doctor from Donna Noble's memory vanish. When a large group of people act only in their own self-interest in using a shared resource, there's a chance that that resource will become, well, crappy. We want all of the benefits and none of the responsibility. This is called the tragedy of the commons. Developed by ecologist Garrett Hardin, he used it to describe the selfish actions of European herders tending to a common pasture. A more modern example might be kind of like how we all love the beach and think dolphins are the coolest, but then that one time you leave your slushy cup behind because whatever, it's just one cup, but then eventually, whoops, there's a million tons of garbage in the ocean. The tragedy of the commons might, as it turns out, also explain why we should support people who create culture. Technology put a big wrench in the culture industry, both large and small, and now we're presented with this huge open resource. Except it's not grass or cows or water or adorable dolphins, it's awesome media. And while it's easy to see a pasture being ruined because it turns brown and stuff, it's not so easy to see the effects, both positive and negative, of freely available culture. Does giving stuff away for free work as a marketing strategy? Yes, sometimes. Is having experienced something that you didn't want to spend money on more valuable than having not experienced it at all? It's really hard to say. The morality of sharing stuff is really complicated. How media gets made, where it comes from, who profits from it is very mysterious. It's essentially arcane. See what I did there? So even support itself can be confusing. I mean, you want your money to go to the person that makes things, not some nameless, faceless organization that sued your grandmother that one time. Which means, ideologically at least, that sharing can sometimes be easier than financial support. But be it spells, tunes, books, or whatever, it's worth considering what all counts as support, because if we don't show it, whatever it is, we run the risk of missing out on that hot new polka track or that cutting-edge unhack my Twitter spell. Ex-Twitteramus! And sure, we can just sit back and let the culture industry figure itself out while reaping the benefits of that wrench in the works. But maybe that's inviting tragedy. What do you guys think? Should people share culture freely? Let us know in the comments, and I cast a spell on you. It's a subscribe spell. If comments were gold coins, we would have enough gold coins to buy a mediocre broadsword. Let's see what you guys had to say about Diablo 3. So clearly we made an obvious misstep in not mentioning Team Fortress 2's Hatconomy, which is really interesting. So interesting, in fact, that we might actually eventually do an episode on it, but as penance for not talking about it, I've actually just gone ahead and gotten myself a couple hats to wear as like punishment. So I'll just do the comments like this. Dovesong1212 wants to know how to pronounce my last name. It's Mike Rugnetta. Pleased to meet you. Majik Pro TV makes a really interesting point about the idea of entitlement, and that if you work really hard for something, you might feel as though you own it. You feel as though you're entitled to it, but that's not actually the case. Like, you don't own a book because you spent a lot of time reading it, which is a little complicated as far as Magical Swords is concerned, but an interesting counterpoint. Angry Geek 1985 and many other people pointed out that Mario does not in fact use his head to bust open blocks, he uses his fist. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. As Hank Green would say, so bad at game. Nighthawk MSU points out the actual legal language that's used by Blizzard to talk about the ownership of in-game items, which is really interesting, but I also think, yeah, there is a lot of discussion to be had. Jasmine Rogers, you just wait. And furthermore, can you ever really know somebody? Yes, the answer is yes to both of these things. Muckins points out that when discussing in-game items and characters, we use language which reinforces the idea of ownership for things that might not actually legally be ours, which is, you know, an interesting idea and pretty true. Truly Evil Bob wants to know what kind of degree I have. I defer an answer to the question to Whimsical Nerd, who nailed it. Haher cites what I think is a legal precedent for the joining of work and possession to create ownership, and then makes a really interesting point about shared loot in video games and who owns those things, which is really interesting. I'm gonna check that out. Pearson v. Post. Oh my God, Ryan Adams, I am a huge, huge fan of yours. Heartbreaker is like maybe one of my favorite records. I'm speechless. My hat is tipped to you. Tip my hat.